Welcome back. For this deep dive, you brought us some excerpts from Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we've got personal stories,
Historical advice.
techniques all mixed in.
And what's really fascinating is that Carnegie himself is kind of woven through all of it. I mean, this isn't some expert just kind of talking at you.
Right.
He's sharing his struggles and what he learned along the way.
I love that. So for this dive,
Mhm.
we're going for like the core ideas,
Yeah.
the most unexpected stuff in the text.
Okay.
And what's going to hit home for you today listening?
I think a lot of people, especially the learner type out there, are really going to relate to Carnegie's own journey.
Okay, so set the scene for us. Where does his story even begin?
All right. So picture this. Carnegie is working for a meatpacking company,
Okay.
dealing with these tough customers,
Oh, yeah.
long hours.
Okay.
He even mentions cockroaches in the office.
Oh, not a dream job, I take it.
No, not at all. Soul-crushing, right?
Yeah. So what kept him going through that?
Well, he had this vision for himself. He really wanted to teach and write.
Okay.
And that desire for a more fulfilling career
Yeah.
kind of pushed him to make this big decision.
Which was
He quit
he quit.
his secure job
Wow.
and started teaching public speaking at night schools. It was a big leap of faith.
Especially back then. I mean, like, giving up a stable job
Right.
was a huge deal.
Huge.
Did it pay off?
Not initially.
Mhm.
Actually, the YMCAs that he first approached wouldn't even give him a decent wage.
Oh, wow.
But here's the twist. Teaching in that kind of demanding, like, night school environment forced him to get really good at what he did.
Okay.
He had to keep his students engaged,
Yeah.
help them actually solve their problems, in real time.
Right.
Like, his lessons had to be practical and inspiring.
Yeah. Otherwise, they just wouldn't come back. Right?
Exactly.
Wow. So basically, the tough situation kind of forced him to level up his skills.
Exactly. And the YMCAs eventually noticed this, and they ended up paying him a much higher rate, like $30 a night,
That's amazing.
based on the value he was bringing.
Wow. So he goes from this, like, awful job.
Cockroaches.
Yeah.
To actually making a living doing what he loved.
That's incredible.
And that's directly what led him to write How to Win Friends and Influence People, which was a massive success, of course.
Right.
He saw people struggling with confidence and communication, and he wanted to share what he had learned.
Makes sense. Because if confidence can make or break your career, imagine what constant worry can do to your life, right?
Oh, yeah. It can be absolutely crippling.
Yeah.
But Carnegie provides some really, practical tools to deal with that.
Yeah.
One of the most fascinating is this idea of living in day-tight compartments.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Break it down for us.
So think about how ships are built with, watertight compartments, right?
Yeah.
If one section gets flooded, the whole ship doesn't sink. And Carnegie's saying we should apply that same concept to our mental lives. Like, we need to kind of seal off the past
Okay.
and the future to really, focus on the present moment.
So it's like mentally separating those anxieties, the worries about yesterday and tomorrow, so they don't kind of leak into today and drown you.
Exactly. It's about stopping those regrets and those what-ifs from stealing your present joy. And this actually came from a famous physician, Sir William Osler, who was a big believer in living a balanced life.
I love that. So think about your own life for a second. How often do you let those worries about the past or the future take away from what's happening right now?
It's so common, right?
Yeah.
We dwell on things we can't change or get anxious about things that might never even happen.
Right.
And we miss the beauty of what's right in front of us.
Right, right. And Carnegie also talks about the importance of action to fight worry. He tells the story about a guy on the verge of suicide, right?
Yeah.
Totally lost after losing his job, facing debt.
This guy felt completely hopeless, utterly defeated.
Yeah.
But then he has this idea. He decides to build a boat.
A boat.
A boat.
Yeah.
And as he starts working on this project,
Okay.
his whole mindset starts to shift.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about keeping busy, but it was having a goal, something that really engaged him.
Exactly.
Right.
And Carnegie ties this to the idea that an idle mind is like a breeding ground for worry.
Right.
He even quotes James L. Mersel, who compares a busy mind to a motor that's running smoothly under a load. Without that load, the motor race is made and eventually burns out.
Wow. That's a great analogy. And it really makes you think about how we spend our free time these days, right?
Right.
Are we constantly scrolling, which can actually make us more anxious? Or are we engaging in activities that actually challenge us?
That's the key difference.
Right.
Are you
Yeah.
creating something? Are you achieving something? Are you getting that sense of purpose?
All right, so we've got like two big ideas so far.
Okay.
We've got compartmentalizing worries and finding purpose in action.
Right.
What else does Carnegie suggest?
He talks about analyzing your worries,
Mhm.
like really breaking them down instead of letting them just spiral in your mind.
Okay.
And he uses this gripping story about a businessman in Shanghai during World War II
Oh, yeah.
who made a mistake that could have landed him in this notorious bridge house prison.
Okay, that sounds terrifying. How did he deal with that level of fear?
Instead of panicking, he used Carnegie's three-step approach.
Right, which is,
First, he figured out the absolute worst thing that could happen, which in his case was pretty bleak.
wow, so he acknowledged the fear but didn't let it kind of paralyze him.
Exactly. The next step was mentally accepting that worst-case scenario. It's
Yeah.
like saying, okay, if that happens, I can handle it.
It's like finding that inner strength to
Mhm.
accept what you can't control.
Right. And then the final step is where you take action. So this businessman, he focused on what he could control, improving upon that worst possible outcome.
Okay.
He carefully thought through his options, weighed the risks and rewards, and came up with a plan.
That's so smart. It's like that saying, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
It is. And Carnegie's formula gives you a really practical way to actually use that wisdom.
This is going to be so good for our listeners out there who thrive on like structure and problem solving.
Right.
They can apply this to any worry, not just like life or death situations. Right.
Absolutely. It's about breaking those big, scary anxieties down into smaller, more manageable parts. And when you shine a light on them, they often lose their power.
That's so true. So we're learning how to manage our thoughts and our actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
To tackle worry. But what about the impact worry has on us? Like when it just feels impossible to let go?
Well, Carnegie makes this really powerful point about the cost of holding on to resentment and bitterness.
Yeah.
He tells this chilling story about Lawrence Jones, a black educator who was nearly lynched in Mississippi.
Wow, such a powerful reminder of the injustices that people face.
It is, but Carnegie actually uses this story to highlight this really universal truth.
What is it?
He compares holding on to that anger, that bitterness, to drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Right.
You might think you're hurting the person you're angry at,
Yeah.
but it's really you who suffers the most.
Wow. That really puts things into perspective.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And it makes you think about how we interact with each other today, right?
Especially online.
Yeah, online there's just so much negativity
Right.
and outrage.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. So choosing our battles and letting go of things we can't control is super crucial for finding that inner peace, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
essential.
Yeah. And that actually leads to another big idea that Carnegie talks about, the power of accepting what we can't change.
Yeah.
He illustrates this with a story about a woman who had been bedridden for over a year
Oh, wow.
due to this heart condition.
Okay.
It sounds truly hopeless.
It does.
But then the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, and suddenly this woman's personal struggles felt insignificant compared to this national tragedy. She literally gets out of bed, starts helping others, and never looks back.
That is incredible.
It's a great example of how shifting our focus outward, helping others,
Right.
can actually be the best medicine for ourselves.
I love that. And it speaks to this deeper human need for purpose, for connection. Carnegie even quotes Carl Jung,
Right.
who said that a lot of his patients weren't suffering from a specific illness, but from the emptiness of their lives.
That's so profound. So they weren't sick, but they were just
Lost.
lost.
And that emptiness can breed all sorts of worry and despair.
Wow. So Carnegie is suggesting that finding meaning, connecting to something bigger than ourselves, is essential for overcoming those feelings. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already, and there's still so much to unpack. Stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll go even deeper into Carnegie's wisdom and explore even more practical tools for conquering worry and living a more fulfilling life. We're back and ready to keep exploring Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Last time we were talking about accepting what we can't change.
Right.
That doesn't mean we just become passive, does it?
No, not at all. It's about focusing our energy on what we can control.
Okay.
And Carnegie gives this example of a businessman named Jim Grant, who was constantly worried about things totally outside his control, like bridges collapsing while he was driving.
Oh, gosh. Like letting your imagination run wild.
Exactly.
Wait, what did you do about it?
He eventually realized how irrational his fears were.
Okay.
And he started looking at, like, the actual likelihood of those things happening.
So he kind of faced the fear and then checked the facts.
Right. And just by writing down those worries and really analyzing them, he was able to see how unlikely they were.
That reminds me of Carnegie's 3-step formula for analyzing worry.
Yeah.
That really intense story of the businessman in Shanghai afraid of being sent to the Bridge House prison.
Right. Defying the Japanese army in World War II, that was a big mistake.
Huge mistake.
With some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah.
But instead of panicking, he followed those 3 steps.
Remind us, what's the first step?
All right. So step 1, identify that worst case scenario, which in this case was pretty bleak.
Yeah.
Imprisonment, maybe even death.
Yeah. So face it head on. Don't let it consume you.
Right. Acknowledge it, move on.
Okay. Step 2.
Step 2, accept that possibility. Not giving up,
Right.
but saying, okay, if that's what happens, I can deal with it. Finding that strength to face the unknown.
Makes sense. But how do you actually do that? How do you accept something that scary?
It takes practice, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is shifting your focus from this shouldn't be happening to, okay, this is happening, and I can find a way to deal with it.
It's about cultivating that inner strength.
Right.
Resilience.
Okay, and then step 3.
Yeah, what's the action?
All right, step 3 is where you take action. You focus your energy on what you can control, improving upon that worst case scenario. So this businessman, he analyzed his options. He weighed the risks and rewards of each choice.
Smart.
Right. He didn't just resign himself to his fate. He took proactive steps to try to change it.
I love it. It's about moving from like a passive state of fear to like an active state of problem solving.
Exactly. It's so empowering.
Yeah. And you know, it reminds me so much of that serenity prayer.
Oh, yeah.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
That's it. And Carnegie's formula is basically giving you a way to actually use that wisdom.
And what's great is that you can apply it to like any worry, big or small.
Right.
It's a framework for dealing with those anxieties in a really constructive way.
Absolutely. So let's say you're worried about an upcoming job interview.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. The worst case scenario.
Yeah.
You totally bomb it.
Right.
They don't offer you the position. You feel like a complete failure.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody's felt that at some point.
Right. But by acknowledging that fear, saying, okay, that could happen, you take away some of its sting.
Yeah.
You mentally accept that possibility. And you remind yourself that even if you don't get the job, it doesn't mean you're a failure.
Right. Okay, so how do you improve upon that worst case?
That's where step 3 comes in. You prepare thoroughly for that interview. You research the company. You practice your answers to common questions.
Right.
You think about how your skills and experience align with the role. You're not dwelling on that fear of failure. You're taking concrete steps to increase your chances of success.
That's great advice. It's so empowering to face your fears like that and take action, right?
It is.
It makes you feel more confident, less anxious.
It's about shifting from that victim mentality to a proactive mindset.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we've been talking about techniques for managing our thoughts and our actions.
Right.
But Carnegie also acknowledges that worry can have a huge impact on our physical health.
Absolutely.
He talks about this link between worry and stress-related illnesses like stomach ulcers, heart disease.
He even shares this really startling statistic from World War II. While about 300,000 Americans died in combat, heart disease killed 2 million civilians back home.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is. And he's suggesting that a significant portion of those heart disease deaths were caused by, you guessed it, worry and stress.
Wow. So stress isn't just an inconvenience.
Right.
It can actually be deadly.
And he even quotes Dr. Alexis Carrel,
Oh, yeah.
who said, businessmen who don't know how to fight worry die young. Pretty powerful statement.
It is. So what can we do? What's the antidote? How do we protect ourselves from these harmful effects of worry?
Carnegie talked about the importance of relaxation, recreation, and he even suggests putting a stop-loss order on our worries.
Okay, stop loss, like in the stock market.
Exactly. Imagine you buy a stock
Okay.
and you set a limit on how much you're willing to lose.
Okay.
You might say, if it drops below this point, sell it automatically. It's a way to protect your investment.
So how do you apply that to worry?
It's about recognizing when a worry is spiraling out of control and consciously deciding to limit how much time and energy you're going to invest in it.
So it's almost like setting a boundary.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this worry is only worth this much of my mental and emotional energy and no more.
That's it.
Like self-preservation.
Exactly. You're recognizing that you have a choice. You don't have to let worry consume you.
Right.
You can choose to step away.
Engage in other activities.
Yeah. Things that bring you joy, relaxation, focus on what you can control.
I love that idea of a stop loss. It's so practical.
Right.
Relatable.
And Carnegie himself said that he wished he had learned this lesson earlier.
Mm.
Yeah. He actually tells a story about a major setback he faced in his 30s when his dream of becoming a novelist was just, like, crushed.
Ouch.
It was a huge blow, for sure.
So much of yourself, and then you're told it's not good enough.
Right.
So what did he do?
Well, instead of, like, wallowing in self-pity, he made this conscious decision to mentally write off that experience.
Okay.
Accepted the loss, grieved it,
Moved on.
and then he moved on.
So he set a stop loss on his regret and disappointment.
And recognized that dwelling on the past wasn't going to change anything.
Right.
He had to focus his energy on the present and the future.
And that's such a good reminder for all of us, right? I mean, we all face setbacks, disappointments.
Yeah.
But they don't have to define us.
Yeah.
We can learn from them,
Grow
from them, and move on.
Right. So we've talked about letting go of the past, accepting the present.
Right.
But Carnegie also emphasizes the importance of finding that purpose, finding that meaning in our lives.
Right. I remember that story about the guy who was on the verge of suicide, but then found solace in building a boat.
Yeah, we talked about it in part 1.
Is there more to it?
There is. I want to focus on how important it is to find that project that truly ignites your passion.
Okay.
For this guy, building that boat wasn't just a distraction.
Okay.
It became his purpose.
Right.
It gave him a reason to get up in the morning, something to look forward to, something to strive for.
It's not just keeping busy,
Yeah.
but finding something that really lights you up.
Yes. Something that makes you feel alive.
Right. And Carnegie suggests that we actually take the time to really explore our options before we commit to a career path.
He does.
Like spend weeks, even months, researching a field, interviewing people, really getting a realistic understanding of what that day-to-day work actually entails.
Because we're talking about potentially dedicating years, decades of our lives to a specific career.
It makes sense.
Right.
So invest the time up front.
To make sure it's a good fit.
It's like test driving a car.
Exactly.
Buy it.
We want to make sure you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, meets your needs.
Enjoy driving it.
I love that analogy. And it speaks to that learner persona, those who are curious, striving to improve themselves, open to new experiences.
And Carnegie also challenges this idea that we're each suited for, like, one specific job.
Okay.
He believes that most people could find success and enjoyment in a variety of fields.
I like that.
Right.
Stay open, try new things, don't let preconceived notions limit you.
Exactly. It all ties back to accepting the inevitable.
Yeah.
Right? Life throws us curveballs.
It does.
Things happen that we can't control.
Yeah.
And sometimes those curveballs lead to really unexpected opportunities.
And sometimes those curveballs can be pretty devastating. Like the woman in the story who was bedridden for months after an illness, convinced she'd never walk again.
It was a very real physical challenge.
And she could have given up hope.
Easily.
Yeah.
Resigned herself to a life of limitation. But then she gets this letter from her nephew.
Okay.
A young soldier who'd been killed in action.
Wow.
In his letter, this young man urges his aunt to keep going, to find a way to move forward despite her grief.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is.
But so inspiring at the same time.
He gave her a reason to keep fighting, a purpose beyond her own pain.
Yeah. And the letter became a turning point for her, right?
It did. She started going back to work, found new interests, and eventually regained her health and her joy.
Such an incredible story of resilience.
Isn't it?
And finding meaning, even in the darkest times.
And it really highlights something that Carnegie emphasizes throughout the book.
What's that?
The importance of human connection. Sometimes, helping others heal is the best way to heal ourselves.
It really is. And that leads to another concept that he explores, forgiveness.
Mm.
He argues that holding on to resentment, that bitterness...
It's so destructive.
Yeah, it eats you up inside.
He tells this story about a guy named George Rona, who got this scathing rejection letter from a potential employer, full of insults, criticisms, even making fun of his grammar.
Oh, man. I've been there. It's so easy to take those rejections personally.
Right. But instead of firing back an angry response, Rona does something unexpected. He writes a letter thanking the guy for pointing out his mistakes.
Wow. That takes a lot of humility.
It does. But the employer was so impressed by his attitude that he actually offered him the job.
So sometimes kindness and forgiveness, even when it feels undeserved,
Right.
can be the most powerful response.
It's a reminder that we don't always know what's going on in someone else's life.
Right.
What might be causing them to act that way. Carnegie believes most people are inherently good, even when they act badly.
Yeah. We misinterpret their actions.
Right.
We assume malice where there might just be insecurity or a lack of self-awareness.
So give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Try to understand their perspective.
Yeah.
Don't take things personally.
Because a lot of times those criticisms are more about them than about us.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's talk about money. Financial insecurity. It's a huge worry for a lot of people.
Huge.
What does Carnegie say about it?
Yeah.
Well, he acknowledges that money worries are incredibly common.
Right.
And he offers some practical advice. He quotes this budgeting expert, Mrs. Elsie Stapleton, who observed that people often just increase their spending right along with their income.
Which doesn't really solve anything.
Right. It's like more money, more problems.
We think more money is going to make us happier, but often it just leads to more complications, more things to worry about.
Exactly. Carnegie emphasizes the importance of creating a budget.
Okay.
And sticking to it.
Yeah. It's not about depriving yourself.
Right.
It's about making conscious choices.
Right. Being in control of your finances instead of letting them control you.
I love that.
And he cautions against, increasing your headaches along with your income.
Right.
He even recommends going to a bank rather than a loan company if you need to borrow money.
All right.
Because banks tend to have more ethical lending practices.
It's about being proactive.
Yeah.
Planning ahead.
Informed choices.
Yeah, and he shares a personal story, actually, about a time when he was super worried about all sorts of potential disasters.
Oh, yeah.
His business failing, his son being injured in the war, his land being seized for an airport.
Letting his imagination run wild.
What happened?
None of it happened.
What?
He spent all that time worrying for nothing.
Oh, that's got to be frustrating.
It is, but it's also a really valuable lesson.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we often waste so much energy on things that never even come to pass.
So don't borrow trouble from the future.
Exactly.
Focus on what you can control right now.
Your thoughts, your actions, your responses to the challenges that life throws your way.
And, for those learner types who are always striving for self-improvement, it's a good reminder that progress is a journey,
right,
not a destination.
It's about celebrating those small wins, and not letting fear hold you back from pursuing your goals.
And speaking of not letting fear hold us back, Carnegie shares some truly inspiring stories.
It does.
About people who overcame incredible adversity.
Yeah, people who faced physical challenges.
Financial ruin.
Loss of loved ones.
He highlights their resilience, right?
He does.
Their ability to find meaning and purpose even when things seemed impossible.
Absolutely. Like Ben Fortson, the guy who lost both of his legs in a car accident.
Oh, yeah?
He could have given up so easily.
Yeah.
But instead, he focused on what he could do.
Not what he couldn't do.
And he even developed a sense of humor about his situation.
That's incredible.
He refused to be defined by his disability.
And that's such a powerful lesson for all of us, right?
It is.
It's not our circumstances, it's our attitude
right,
that determines how we experience life.
And Ben's story really highlights this power of gratitude.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on what he'd lost, he focused on what he still had.
His health, his loved ones.
The ability to make people laugh.
And that gratitude just fueled his resilience, his ability to find joy, even in the face of so much adversity.
It's a lesson we can all apply to our lives.
It really is. No matter what we're going through, there's always something to be thankful for.
Absolutely.
And by shifting our focus to those blessings,
right,
we start to see possibilities.
Instead of problems.
And
that shift can be so powerful.
So in this part, we've explored a lot of these practical techniques for managing worry, this importance of self-care, setting boundaries, that power of purpose, resilience, the transformative effects of gratitude and forgiveness.
And as we head into the final part, we're going to delve even deeper into Carnegie's insights on cultivating a positive mental attitude.
I like it.
Finding strength in connection. And embracing our authentic selves.
I can't wait. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll continue to uncover the timeless wisdom of how to stop worrying and start living. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into how to stop worrying and start living. We've talked about practical techniques, inspiring stories.
Yeah, and one of the themes that I keep noticing is just how important it is to cultivate a positive mental attitude.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually, like, make that shift from worry to optimism?
Well, it's not always easy,
No.
but Carnegie offers some concrete steps.
Okay.
One that I find really interesting is the idea of, like, thinking and acting cheerfully.
Okay.
He suggests that our emotions often actually follow our behavior.
Okay.
So if we act as if we're confident and happy, those feelings will eventually become more genuine.
So it's kind of like fake it till you make it.
In a way, yeah. It's not about denying your real feelings or pretending that everything's okay when it's not. It's about making that conscious choice to focus on the positive, to look for solutions, and to just act in a way that aligns with the person you want to be.
I like that. And it reminds me of his advice about losing yourself in action.
Yeah.
When we're really engaged in something, especially something we find meaningful,
Right.
we naturally shift our focus away from those worries.
Absolutely. He tells this story about a woman who was just consumed with worry after her son joined the armed forces.
Oh gosh, especially after Pearl Harbor.
Right. She tried to distract herself with housework and stuff,
Okay.
but her mind would just race with all these anxious thoughts.
I can only imagine. To know that your child is in harm's way and you're powerless to protect them.
It's a primal fear.
It is.
But this woman, she actually found a solution that really worked for her.
What was it?
She got a job
She got a job.
as a saleswoman in a department store
Okay, that's an interesting choice. Why a sales job?
because it forced her to be present,
Mm-hmm.
to engage with customers, make decisions, solve problems.
Yeah.
She was so busy that she literally didn't have time to worry.
Wow. So it was like the job itself was almost a form of therapy,
Okay, well,
helping her cope with that anxiety.
and it reminds us that sometimes the best way to quiet our minds is to really engage our bodies and our attention in these demanding activities.
Right. It's not about running away from your problems. It's about channeling your energy
Hmm.
into something positive and productive.
Exactly. So how do you spend your leisure time?
That's a good question.
Are you constantly scrolling on your phone,
Hmm.
which we know can actually increase anxiety?
Can.
Or are you engaging in things that challenge you, that make you feel alive, that bring you joy?
Yeah, those are the things we need to look for. And Carnegie's advice isn't just about physical work, right?
Yeah.
He also talks about, like, mental engagement.
He was a big believer in the power of reading, especially for managing worry.
Oh, I love that.
He said that a good book can transport us to another world, help crowd out those anxious thoughts.
It's like a mental vacation.
It is. And he actually used this technique himself to cope with a prolonged nervous breakdown.
Really?
He immersed himself in this multi-volume biography of Thomas Carlyle,
Wow.
and he found it incredibly helpful.
So reading can be a form of self-care.
Absolutely. And it's not just about escapism either.
Right.
Reading, especially challenging or thought-provoking material, can help us broaden our perspectives,
Right.
gain new insights,
Yeah.
develop a more resilient mindset.
Like exercise for your brain.
Exactly.
So we've got physical activity,
Mm.
mental engagement, even that fake it till you make it
Right.
for a positive attitude.
Yeah.
But what about when we're really struggling? Like we need extra help.
Carnegie talks about seeking guidance from others,
Yeah.
especially those who've already navigated those same challenges.
Okay.
And he tells this incredible story about a young missionary in India who was totally burnt out.
That's hard work.
He was on the verge of giving up, felt overwhelmed by the demands of his work, the suffering he was witnessing.
Yeah. So much need, and you feel like you're not making a difference.
It was taking a toll on him, mentally, emotionally, physically.
Yeah.
But then, one night, he's praying,
Okay.
and he has this really profound experience.
What happened?
He feels this voice asking him if he's really ready for this work.
Like challenging him.
Yeah, to step up
To commit.
to his purpose.
Wow.
And the missionary, he admits that he's reached his breaking point.
Yeah.
He says, I just can't do it alone anymore.
Oh, what did the voice say?
The voice replies, if you will turn that over to me and not worry about it, I will take care of it.
Wow. It's like he was being asked to surrender control, to trust that there was a higher power at work.
And the moment he did that,
Mm-hmm.
he felt this incredible sense of peace,
Wow.
renewed energy. He worked for decades after that
Yeah.
and never experienced that same level of exhaustion again.
Amazing. And it's such a powerful example of faith and surrender.
It is.
But even for people who aren't particularly religious, I think there's a really universal message there. It's
Mhm.
about finding that source of support.
Right.
Whether it's through faith, community, a trusted friend, mentor that can help us navigate these tough times.
We weren't meant to go through this alone. We all need those people in our lives who offer that encouragement, that guidance, perspective when we're feeling lost.
Right, right. And it ties into Carnegie's emphasis on human connection.
Yeah.
Building those strong relationships, cultivating empathy and understanding.
Essential.
Yeah. And he tells this really heartwarming story about a woman who was going through a really rough time.
Okay.
She had lost everything. Business had failed, lost her home.
Oh, wow.
And she was even having thoughts of suicide.
Oh, God.
It seemed like her world was just falling apart.
So what happened?
Well, she had this moment of clarity.
Okay.
Where she realized that even though she had lost all these things, she still had her health, her family, the opportunity to start over.
She chose gratitude over despair, found strength in the midst of adversity.
And as she started to focus on what she did have, rather than what she'd lost, that hope started to come back.
It's amazing how a shift in perspective can have such a profound impact.
It really is. And it reminds us that happiness isn't about external things, like wealth or status. It comes from within.
It does.
From our ability to find that peace, even when things are tough.
And a big part of that is connecting with others, building those relationships based on love and support.
Absolutely. And speaking of love and support, Carnegie also talks about the importance of family.
He does. He tells this story about a man who was really ashamed of his childhood poverty.
Okay.
Remembers wearing his dad's cast-off clothes, feeling embarrassed, inferior.
Yeah, that feeling of not fitting in.
Especially for kids.
It's tough.
But looking back, this man realizes his parents' love and support, that was way more valuable than any material possession.
Right.
They instilled in him this strong work ethic, belief in his abilities, sense of purpose, that ultimately led him to a successful career.
Wow.
It's a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's about the quality of our relationships.
The love and support we give and receive from those that matter most.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point. Be yourself.
Okay, yeah.
Carnegie says that trying to be someone you're not is a recipe for unhappiness and anxiety.
Right.
He shares how he tried to imitate famous actors when he was starting out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he thought he could create some kind of winning formula.
Combining all their best qualities.
Right. But he quickly realized that it just felt inauthentic.
Yeah.
Doomed to fail.
Right.
He had to embrace his own unique talents and personality.
You can't be a pale imitation of somebody else.
Exactly. And he illustrates this with the story of George Gershwin.
Oh, yeah, the composer.
Right. When Gershwin was young and struggling, he was offered this job as Irving Berlin's musical secretary.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It was.
Why would he turn that down?
Well, Berlin recognized Gershwin's unique talent, and he didn't want him to become a second-rate Berlin.
Wow, what great advice.
Right. He encouraged Gershwin to be yourself and predicted that he would one day be a first-rate Gershwin.
And he was.
He was. Powerful reminder that our greatest strength really lies in embracing our individuality.
Yeah. And for those learner types out there who are constantly seeking knowledge, exploring new ideas.
It's so easy to compare ourselves to others. Feel like we're not good enough.
We should be more like so-and-so.
Right. But each of us has something special to offer the world.
That's a great point.
It's about discovering our own unique gifts and using them to make a positive impact.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into how to stop worrying and start living, what are the key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the most important message is that we have more power over our thoughts and our feelings than we realize.
Yeah.
We can choose to focus on the positive, to take action, to seek support. We can choose to live each day with purpose, with gratitude.
And a belief that we can overcome those challenges.
That's it.
And that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into how to stop worrying and start living. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical tools that will help you navigate those worries and create a more peaceful and fulfilling life for yourself.